Alright, and welcome to the first episode of, Season 2 for the Post Race Podcast. As always, you got Noah on this end and you got Avery on the other end. Um, Obviously, with the preseason, we are still waiting to get more news to talk about besides the off-season news. The silly season update. But we still got something to talk about. This week, the big news coming out of IndyCar, obviously, is Connor Daly with his what people call his first shot at a proper 500 win, or at least a 500 in general, after his previously failed attempts with Schmidt, Peterson, AJ Foyt, and Dale Coyne.
Could be a big break for the guy.
It could be. This is really his first time now being a part of the Andretti Armada, depending on where Andretti puts him in that line of drivers, along with Marco, Ryan, and Zach, obviously.
Rossi.
And Rossi, obviously. I don't even know how I forgot Rossi. When I first heard this news, it was a mixture of, wow, that's actually really interesting that he got the ride. But the other thing I also noticed is Stefan Wilson. He's taking his car. Now the question is, where's Stefan going to go? Because now he's left without a ride. With a couple months left, we still have a lot of time to get a ride, but with where we're at right now and the lack of seats being available, the question now comes up, will Andretti get him another ride, or Stefan basically got booted out of another ride for his second time?
Yeah, Stefan, I didn't even think he would get a ride this year. His sponsorships aren't really there, and credit to Connor because I'm sure he did most of his work on his own, and he's been doing that for a couple of years, and the Air Force team seems to like him, and if they're thinking that he did well last year and get a better car this year, I mean, they must think he can possibly win the thing or get a top 5. I mean, that'd be big for Connor, and I'm sure he'd get a full-time ride the next year.
Yeah, that is true. Something that was brought up by somebody else was the fact that the reason probably that he was able to get that ride with the sponsorship of the U.S. Air Force is because of security. The fact that he made the 500 last year showed enough of we can put our money on this guy that he'll get us into the show, so that way we're not wasting millions of dollars on sponsorship just to not even make it to the race. Because as everybody knows, as long with Pippa and Hinch, it doesn't matter how much your sponsor pays for the 500. It's always going to have an asterisk next to it because there's no such thing as provisionals when it comes to the Indianapolis 500.
Yep.
It's either you're in the show or you're too slow and you don't make the show.
There's a different aura with the Andretti team, though, because it seems like they have a couple cars that aren't as good as the race winners that they've had, but they all seem to make the show except for 5 years ago or 2011 where everything just went crazy. I feel like if they have a couple good cars, then that last car will latch on. So I don't think it really matters who's the driver, even though I'm sure that's what the Air Force thought. I think if Hinch was in that car, he'd make it, even though he didn't make it last year. Or I think Pippa, we've criticized her in the past, but if she had an Andretti car, she would make the race. I mean, unless it was 2011 and Ryan Hunter-Reay didn't even make the race. So I don't think it's more of who's driving the car. It's more of what team.
Yeah, I can argue a little bit against you about that. Knowing of what I've heard from people within to have connections to that team, or at least know, knowing Pippa, even if you could give her Will Power's car, she still would struggle to make the race, or let alone mid-pack.
Yeah, but she's never had that problem in the past. It was only last year, and that was definitely her worst car. So yeah. I feel like people discredit her, even though she's not the best driver we've ever seen. She has made the race consistently, except last year. That was a whole different story.
Well, even then, in 2017, she started on the last row, didn't she? She started in the back, and then she stays in the back. The only reason that she really ever actually makes the 500 is because there's nobody else to bump her. she struggled with the Universal Aero Kit, and then they came in the modified Aero Kit, whatever the hell you want to call that abysmal of a 2015 car. Despite the fact that it gave it good racing, it was an ugly car. I'm just gonna leave it at that. She struggled even with that, which was said to have been an easier car to drive, and she struggled to qualify well or even make it out of the last row. So she comes into this, and she had an entire, basically, not like half a month, and she couldn't even get it outside, basically the top 25. Can't really recall one day where she would get out of maybe the bottom quarter of the field. And it even came down to the fact where she naturally had a fast car, she was just that off pace.
I think that's something that could be argued because even though you can say that, but her starts in the 500 have been in the top 30. Her
that says a
in
lot.
In the last 5 years, it was 28th, 25th, 25th, and 22nd. Those couple years, so she wasn't even close to being bumped or whatever. Even though there were only 33 cars in the race in 2016 and 17. So I honestly do believe, even though she's not the most talented person, I do think in an Andretti car she'd make the race easily, unless we had something like 2011.
Yeah, I mean, you would really have to fuck up to not make it an Andretti car, because we're talking about the difference between a Dale Coyne car and an Andretti car, which is basically an entire another level. So even I will admit, if she was an Andretti car, there's probably a good possibility that she would make the field. Now, I'm not saying she would make a top 15 in a qualifying run. She'd probably be stuck around 20th on back like she is now, or was, I guess you could say. But anyways, we're not even talking about Pippa. We're talking about Connor here. We looked in the past, and we talked about this before we went on the air, of Connor's past races. Was his best finish of, you had the answer, right? It was like 22nd, was it?
21st.
21st. And what year was that? It was this year, right?
Last year.
Yeah, you get what I mean now.
Last year, 2018, yeah.
And then even before that, he never finished the race. The last time he finished the race between last year was his first race, which I believe was in 2013, right? And that was with AJ Foyt.
13, yep, 2013.
Yes.
Yeah, he finished 22nd in that race. And so his average is about 27th.
Yes, because ever since then, he's either had an engine blow or just straight up crashed into the wall. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Connor can do. Obviously, you can see that he has the potential to do it, and now he has a car that can give him that potential to go out there and run. Now, is he going to win the 500 like everybody's hyping up? I doubt it. It's his first year. I don't think that he could do it, but obviously with drivers in the past like Rossi and Taku, you can't really count them out. You could have the slowest car on the grid out of the Andretti Armada and still win the race, like what happened with Taku. Going into the race, barely any of the team members thought that they were going to win the race because they had the slowest car out of everyone in the team, and they just straight up admitted that they sucked. And then they ended up going out being one of the last cars to survive the race and go on to win the race. So it's going to be interesting to see what Connor can do with that Air Force ride.
Yeah.
If you have any final thoughts on that.
Honestly, it really just depends on which car you get, because Stephen Wilson had an awful car last year, and he was in the top 5 with 10 to go. So, I mean, it honestly just depends on which Andretti car you get. They have so many that you'd be lucky to finish the race because all of them are doing different things, and you never really know what's going to happen. And there's always 2 other cars that aren't great, but again, Stephen Wilson almost won the race if he would have had a little more fuel. So, and he was the worst of the bunch last year regarding qualifying, besides Rossi, which was a fluke. So yeah, I mean, it all just depends on if he's lucky enough to get one of the better cars.
All right. Uh, Next up on the news is something that came out recently out of the Long Beach Grand Prix. As everybody knows, they um, lost their sponsorship. Toyota decided they're not going to return after almost over 40 years of being the title sponsor for the Long Beach Grand Prix, now leaving it open, and it has been announced that Tuesday they're going to make an announcement for the sponsor. Aaron is basically been linked at this point and confirmed, or basically rumored to the point where you already know it's probably going to happen, and it's more than likely going to happen, that Honda is going to pick up where Toyota left off, and now it's going to be either the Grand Prix of Long Beach presented by Honda, or the Honda Long Beach Grand Prix. But then there is a topic going around that Honda might not actually use their actual name and instead insert their luxury car brand, Acura, because they're in that same weekend IMSA races, and they bring their Michael Shank has his Acura team in the GTD category. So it could be possible that we could see Acura be the title sponsor, which to me seems more realistic to happen, as Long Beach, in my eyes, is the Monaco Grand Prix for the United States. So it makes more sense to hear that a luxury car brand is a title sponsor rather than not really an American car brand, but the American version of it. Basically, the Chevy version of it. It's like saying, even though it's called a Chevy Duel in Detroit, it would sound more classy if it was the Cadillac Grand Prix, the Cadillac Duels in Detroit, or something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you not have anything to add on that?
It's interesting because it's weird because if they go the Acura route, then you're going to have people speculating, well, is Acura going to enter? And they have ties with Penske, so Acura Penske might be a thing in the future, even though they've been a Chevy team for so long. And it gets you speculating, but you never really know. It could just be miraculous, which is kind of a boring
You had
thing,
a bit of a connection issue
happens.
there for a sec. I don't know. You might want to repeat what you said because you cut out there for about a second or two.
It basically just depends on if they're going to do Acura, what are they going to do with it?
Yeah, but yes, like I said prior, Long Beach is the big California beach town. It is this big fancy event where all the Hollywood celebrities come out, and you have all these big events and everything, and have the art museum, yada yada yada. It's California. It makes perfect sense that the race that they basically use to call their Hollywood race has the more fancier title, especially with the fact that they have the Pro-Am race with a bunch of celebrities, and I think Honda would rather have them race their Acuras, their luxury brand Acura cars, rather than their Honda Accords.
Yeah, I agree. Basically, where I'm getting at is if it's going to be the title sponsor, I'm just curious why they want it to be the title sponsor, and if there's any ulterior motives to bring Acura as the third engine manufacturer in the near future.
I don't really see that happening. I get what you're trying to stir up with that. I guess you could refer to that as banter at this point. Who knows? Literally, IndyCar is a very, 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 very weird series, and you can't really predict whatever is going to go on in there. Moving on from that, the last thing we got on our IndyCar side is the update on Robert Wickens. If you've been paying attention during the offseason ever since Pocono, Robert has gotten significantly better since Pocono in a very short amount of time frame for what his condition is. From going to wearing a back brace and not even being able to really move, to now being able to walk, obviously with assistance, but still being able to move his legs and walk is honestly something very incredible to watch.
Yeah, it's very good to see. I mean, when you got guys like a couple weeks ago at the 24 hours, you had Alex Zanardi out there, and it's good to see those guys still racing, but it just leaves a bad feeling in your heart, and it's nice to know that Robert is in good spirits and he's pushing. And honestly, when we first heard the news, we were not sure that he'd be able to walk again, but I do see him walking in the next couple of years. I'm not saying he's going to get in a race car again, but I do see him trying to make that a goal.
You talk about him maybe walking next few years. With the way that he's going, I could see him walking around the midpoint of the season. Now, I don't think he's going to race the season. I think that's out of the question with where he's at, unless he really progresses strongly to the point where he's literally walk around a paddock like nothing ever happened. I would give him maybe a season or two from coming back. And if you watch any of the podcasts in the past, you would know that both of us agreed that there was a very good chance that Robert was not going to make his return to the six car. After watching Zanardi race, in all honesty, that was the thing that made me realize, wow, if Zanardi can do it, then more than likely, so can Robert Wickens, another driver that you can put up there. I don't know if you know who this is, Avery. I'm probably going to butcher his name too. He's a Formula 3 driver. His name is Billy Monger. He races over in the United Kingdom is the better term. He was involved in a really horrific accident that was involved in that ended up in the same way of what happened to Alex Zanardi. Only difference is literally Billy got back in the car like right after it happened, and surprisingly enough, he's still winning races and he's still running very well. I follow the dude on Instagram and seeing what he's doing with all the podium finishes and all the wins, and you just see him up there with those prosthetic legs. It just proves to you you don't need really to have legs in order to be able to go fast. You just need to know what the hell you're doing and have the right idea for what you need to do, and just enough people behind you to make it happen. So in my eyes, Robert Wickens' return is actually now more possible than I originally thought, but all the way back in August when the wreck first happened.
Yeah, he still has problems with his strength and his feet. That's why I would give it a couple years. His spinal cord doesn't seem to be there yet, stimulated all the way. And there was a one thing I can connect this to is a Pittsburgh Steelers player, Ryan Shazier, who had a spinal cord issue, and he still wants to get back playing football. And this was a year and a half ago. He's walking, but it's with a cane, and he still doesn't have full strength, and he still wants to play football. So give it a couple of years, and you never know. I mean, Robert's issue is different than Zanardi and Monger's. It's not that he's having limbs cut off or anything, or has to use prosthetic legs. It's more of a spinal cord issue.
Yeah, and obviously the spinal cord, if that doesn't work, then literally it doesn't matter what you do, it's gonna fail. I haven't paid enough attention to the updated situation, because I know when it first happened with the whole swelling that it was questionable on how it's going. I believe already that's obvious with him walking that the swelling has gone down, but I guess I'd have to do my research on this when we get off, how his spinal cord injury is doing, if the swelling has gone down, and if it really was temporary, and if he can really make a full recovery, and if so, how long that might take, depending on just how much he works at it. I hate to use something like WWE as a reference, but I think you might know where I'm going at. You look at people like John Cena, who has, what was it, like a pectoral muscle that he tore?
Yeah.
And he came back in, like, what, less than a year?
Oh, Triple H did one, and it was like 3 months.
Yeah, like he tore a quad, didn't
Yeah,
he, in the middle of the ring?
yeah. There's been multiple injuries like that, and it's because those guys rehab 24/7. And knowing Robert, I don't really know him that much, but I'm sure he is taking this a little less serious and having a little more fun with it, but still trying to get back as soon as possible and wanting his first win. That should have happened.
Yeah. Um, the part of it being serious, I think he really is taking it seriously because I don't think he really. This is gonna sound really rude, but does he? He doesn't really have much else that he can do. It's obvious just watching the videos. He's doing multiple kinds of rehab, whether it's just therapy or actually moving his legs and his arm, or it's his mental strength or something like that. Um, it was I refer to John Cena. He got that nickname Super Cena because of how ridiculously fast he was able to recover from injuries. If Robert comes back at the pace that he's going and he comes back earlier than expected, I think it's going to be safe to say that we can call him either Super Wiki or like Super Wiccan or something like that along those lines. Because it's crazy to think how far he's came ever since we first saw the images of him. Well, like when he was first transported to the hospital.
Yeah, it was very sad, and it's it's a lot nicer seeing a guy be so happy and enthusiastic about just taking those few steps every single day.
Uh, yeah, right on. The next topic, we're going to move on over to the NASCAR side. The one that is going to sound somewhat rude, but the more pressing, not pressing, but the bigger story, I guess. NASCAR having its first real open test of the season. It was broadcasted live, so it was the first look that NASCAR fans had on the 2019 Aero package. And a lot of mixed opinions coming out of the woodworks from that test. Obviously, a lot of positives, as you would assume, from either NASCAR execs or even some drivers. Um, but already, some pretty strong complaints are being thrown against this Aero package, as we've seen from Kyle Busch or just any other driver that have came out. The main one that we all saw was Kyle Busch talking about um, trouble passing in the car, passing each other, where you had to make a dive bomb. And basically, from the looks of it, is they're basically freight training around the racetrack like they used to, or basically already do at the super speedways, where they get one big conga line and they just go lap around, lap around, lap because nobody can pass each other.
Yeah, it's very divisive, and I think this is honestly the worst thing NASCAR could do is make the fans more against each other, because you got one group who doesn't think this is any good, and it's more of a group that sides with the drivers in most cases. But I've also heard some drivers say it's not that bad. Like Brad Keselowski, he didn't seem to have that many issues with it. But we've also seen one test, so it's hard to really tell, especially at a place like Las Vegas. It's definitely going to be a lot more pack racing, and I feel like for the fans at home, it's going to be a lot more interesting. But if you're there live, it's not. It's going to be just a race. It's not going to be much.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed from the test, like I was talking about the freight training, is the goal was they wanted to get tighter pack racing, which they did. But now there's another pressing issue, which is passing. Something that Kyle Busch talked about, and it really sparked an idea in my head. He talked about the trouble passing each other, where you get a big run on a car, and then you get up to him, and you couldn't do anything with it. You would have to dive bomb into the corner and hope that it would stick in order to make a pass and make really bold strategy decisions in order to pull off a pass. When I heard that, it reminded me of the situation that F1 had back in 2017. Now, there's a video about this done by Chain Bear. I think it's Chain Bear F1 on YouTube. I highly recommend go watching this video. It's a really good video about the 2019 wing changes. The issue that F1 had in 2017 was, at the time, the main goal that they had was they wanted the cars to go faster, and they put that to work, and they made it happen. The cars were going faster to the point where they're breaking track records at every single event. The problem that was a trade-off was nobody could pass. What would happen is cars would run up on each other with these huge momentums, and unless you had the DRS, you would get right to them, and the moment you got in a second with them, it's just this big wall of air, and you can't do anything with it. So you're stuck behind them, so you have to get closer to them and hoping that they make a mistake, or you can find a hole that they left, and you can make that move and hope that it sticks, and you don't end up taking each other out. I see the same thing going on with NASCAR. You saw tighter pack racing, as you can see in the thumbnail above you, and you can see in the videos. They're tight with each other, and they're racing each other bumper to bumper, but nobody can make a pass because the car seemingly is not allowing them to be able to have enough of a run to make a pass.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it also didn't seem like they ever spread it out. At Daytona, after a while, it seems like the cars end up like falling just a bit in the back and don't get that great draft. But I feel like there's going to be a huge drop off in lap car management when it comes to the front, which isn't really something everybody thinks about, but that would be very dangerous if there started being lap cars when this huge pack comes around, because they were like 3-4 wide all the way around, because you can't really push someone like what you were just saying. Once you get to their bumper, you're not going anywhere. So everybody would spread out so much that it was like hard to know where your driver was or anything.
Yeah, that's another good thing to talk about. And it's something that you can see when you watch the super speed races. They'll have these big pack of cars running with each other, and if you're not in the draft, you fall off like a rock. If that happens, you're gonna have cars going possibly 10 to 20 miles an hour slower off the pace already compared to the leaders, and you have a pack of 24 cars approaching that one car, and they're all spread around the track. What is that lap car going to do? I think there's more of a hazard that's going to be in the way of this car, because he can wave the blue flag at him, but he can't go anywhere because he can't go up high, because there's probably going to be cars up there, and he's going to get shoved into the wall, or worse, he's going to get tapped by one of the leaders and end up taking the whole field out, like you would see at a super speedway race. So
usually super speedway races, there's less of a conjunction to where they can sort of swerve past the car and just get right back in line. But there's literally no line here. It's just scatter.
Yes, and another thing that they also talked about is how they're taking the skills away from the drivers, as stated by Kyle Busch and apparently a couple others. I can't remember off the top of my head. I just remember watching the Kyle Busch post-test conference. We were talking about how they're taking the skills away from the drivers to where it's getting easy to drive, where there's not really a challenge in driving it. It's just how much of a lead foot you have and how hard you can turn that wheel in order to make it stick. Now, alongside the issue of not really being able to pass, what it's really interesting to think and kind of confusing how this is going to work when you get to a track like Atlanta, or they get to a track like Pocono, or even Indianapolis. A track like Indianapolis is a good example, where it's really hard to pass already as it is, and now you have basically the Xfinity package at the race, where they're going to be bumper to bumper. But now the question remains, are they even going to be able to pass each other going into the corners or even on the straights?
Yeah, sometimes you don't even notice it. That's the crazy thing. You don't even notice that there's no passing, because it seems like there is, because it's so tightly packed. Like that Xfinity race from a couple years ago, not this year specifically, but there was one a couple years ago that they used this package, and William Byron won it. And no one really passed, but it seemed like a great race because everything was so tight. And usually everything at Indy spreads so far apart. So I've been praying for this package or some type of package because at Indy there's not much racing when they're all spread up. So you might as well clump them together, and hopefully that does something. But realistically, they can't pass. So at the end of the day, it's the same thing. Just they're closer together instead of spread out. I'd rather have them closer together, specifically at Indy, because it does make for a better show. Because there still is some passing, but it's farther in the pack, rather than literally no passing, single file around the track, and there's no fans there because they know who's going to win the race. I'll have 5.
Yeah, that's one of the other things that is basically now gone with the NASCAR rule package that's going into effect. Is it's going to be a lot harder for leaders to get a start, or even, I guess, pit strategy where you'll go out of pit lane or you're going to have a good start and you can jump out to 2 seconds by 3 laps. That effectively is gone because now these drivers are going to be sucked up on like a vacuum cleaner to where they're going to be right on their bumper by the time they get to turn 3. That could possibly work at Indianapolis. The only problem is it's a 1-lane racetrack and it's already struggling up to pass. We somewhat saw it work in the Xfinity race this past year, which I thought was one of the better shows of the entire day, if not basically the whole weekend, going back, well, I guess going forward to the ARCA race later on in October. Just the amount of pack racing going on the straights and then even in the corners was just phenomenal, seeing 8 cars in a tandem draft pack side by side with each other, and then obviously that Indy Lights style 4-wide finish just to the end of stage 1. Yet somehow they can't do that for stage 3.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Could you imagine? This would be the perfect scenario, but NASCAR can do it. Could you imagine if they took one IndyCar rule that said you can't block? Could you just imagine how many more passes we get at a Brickyard if no
I'm sorry, you're having like really bad connection issues. If you want to repeat that.
Could you imagine if they took the rule from IndyCar that you can't block? So then you'd have drivers going all the way down deep and passing once they get into the turn, and the car up front couldn't block. That would work perfectly at Indy, but they're never going to do it.
Yeah. Plus the fact that you can't really call when they snake it through the front stretch blocking because they're already doing it before the guy right behind him is doing it. So I can't really call that blocking, so it would already effectively take that part out unless they say you can't even snake it down the track, which knowing NASCAR, I would not even be surprised if they did that.
NASCAR's got some serious issues no matter what package they go because their fan base is leaving them. It doesn't matter what the package is. It's not a good look for NASCAR no matter what they do. They're trying to save it as much as possible, and they're just pouring more gas into the fire.
Exactly. Especially with the fact that with the words that came out of the NASCAR vice president after the conclusion of the test, with what the driver's comments had to say, with basically, you better watch yourself, and people took this as a threat. It wasn't really a threat, more of a forewarning, which I kind of agree with. They say you take the skills out of it and it becomes easy. Well, that's going to make the teams think that you're not worth as much anymore, so that's going to cut you straight into your pockets. And that's not saying, oh, we're going to give you detrimental to stock car racing, which I could totally see happening compared to what happened with 2013 and 2007. But if these cars become easier and it becomes less skills, then it's going to be very easy for Cup teams to decide, hey, we're paying these guys way too much money for a job that's apparently so easy.
Yeah, the other way people took it as, hey, we're going to fine you if you keep talking bad about our product. I can understand that because the drivers aren't helping get more fans to the sport anyways. They keep saying stuff like, "Oh, we don't understand why we're losing fans," and it's like it's because you guys are trashing your own sport too. So just be quiet. You're making it a lot worse for everybody. If Kyle Busch goes on and says, "Oh, there's going to be if there's going to be less skill," and he doesn't end up winning as much as he did this year, there's going to be a lot of drop off from fans who believe every single thing he says, and they're going to be like, well, there's not skill anymore, so we're going to stop watching. So even if you did take it as the VP saying we're going to fine you if you keep talking like this, they do that in other sports. It's not that hard. If someone complains about how the NFL referee did, the guy's going to get in trouble. It's just something that happens in life. If you watch any other sport, this stuff happens, and if you talk bad about what you get paid to do, you're gonna get pay cut, maybe a fine. So either way you take it, it's not as bad as it seems.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe if they drove off from NASCAR, they can do like we did and go switch over and start watching IndyCar more often. God knows, we'd love to see that happen. See the stands even get more filled up than what they somewhat already are for some of their more key races.
Not even that. Kyle Busch, 2020 Indy 500. Let's make it happen. Come on, Joe Gibbs.
Yeah,
Come on.
Let it happen. Come on, Joe. We really need to see this one happen.
We are not huge fans of Kyle, but and now we love Kurt. So come on.
All right. Any final thoughts from what we have?
It's. I mean, Xfinity going faster than Cup. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is true. It is crazy. There's not really much else to say besides the fact, though. It's just a slower aero package. It's obvious to tell that it's affecting it. You gotta wonder now, though, if Xfinity is faster, are they gonna bog down the Xfinity cars now? So that way.
No.
You don't want that to happen.
I don't think so. I like it the way it is. I also think the people who are leaving the sport and stop watching would never know if the Xfinity cars were faster because they don't pay that much attention. The hardcores will always be there until the day that NASCAR is done. But it's the people who want to watch just a random Sunday night race who have no clue that there's even Xfinity series. Those are the people who are leaving. It's not the people who are hardcores who will watch a 200 lap race where nothing happens. It's the people who just want to watch good action for an hour and a half.
Yeah. But doesn't it really not make a whole lot of sense when you go from Xfinity Series to the Cup Series? Because now you're going slower than you were previously?
Oh, yeah, it doesn't make sense at all when you actually look at it. But like I said, I mean, technically, I don't think it hurts anybody. I don't think Xfinity is going to be like the new big deal because it's on Saturdays and they have faster cars. It is very weird to think that these cars that are supposed to be the developmental people are faster than these cars. You know what I'm saying? But in the end of the day, I don't think it matters. It's like, I hate keep going to these sports analogies, but when certain players are perfectly good and fine to go to the major leagues right when they get drafted, but they spend 4 years in the minors and they're way better than half of the people up at the top. So you got Clayton Kershaw, who's the best pitcher in the league, and he's in the minors for 4 years when he could easily be winning World Series, it it just doesn't make any sense. To normal fans, it's really confusing that this the big show is going to be slower cars, but at the end of the day, the target that they're looking for does not know about that.
That's somewhat of a fair point, I guess. Um, I don't really have much else of a topic that we can talk about, if unless you have something that you want to throw out there, unless you want to get into your favorite part of the show to wrap this up.
Well, it's been a long off season. We're back. I mean, it's a good time. There's not a lot of racing, so there's not much rants you can do right now. So we're gonna call it a show until we have some worse things to talk about and bad things to talk about.
Which, knowing with what we're seeing right now, give it till the duels, we'll get something for you.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying.
All right. So that'll wrap it up here. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. I'll leave links down in the description for both our Twitters, including the official Post Race Podcast Twitter account. Until next time.
Same time, same pace. Please.